It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was standing at the altar, heart pounding with joy, surrounded by family, friends, and love. Then the unthinkable happened. Sirens, flashing lights, and marching down the aisle. Not a bride, not a flower girl, but Karen from the HOA, flanked by two so-called officers, shouting that the entire event was illegal. What she didn't know: my husband, the man waiting for me at the end of that aisle, is a high-ranking law enforcement officer. And this time, she messed with the wrong bride. People gasped. My maid of honor dropped her bouquet. One of the guests actually screamed. First, I thought it was some horrible prank. But when the two men in uniform started shouting legal codes and saying we were violating city ordinances, I knew this wasn't a joke. It was a full-blown ambush. Karen stood there smugly, arms crossed like she was leading a military raid, barking orders like, "Shut it down. This wedding is illegal under HOA Regulation 14B. Mind you, 14B is about lawn decorations." I could see my fiancé, my now husband, go completely still. That's when something shifted. The guests didn't know it yet, but the man they were watching silently walk toward the imposter cops wasn't just a handsome groom in a tuxedo. He was a decorated federal officer with 20 years of service. And he knew exactly what to do. He leaned in and said something I'll never forget. "You've just impersonated federal officers." In front of a federal officer. Karen's smile dropped. And that's when everything really went off the rails. Karen blinked, her smug expression melting into confusion, then panic. What are you talking about?" she stammered, glancing nervously at the fake officers beside her. But it was too late. My husband slowly reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out his badge. Not for show, not for drama, but because it was time to make things real. Gasps echoed again. Phones were out now. Guests recording everything, jaws dropping, whispers flying. "Wait, is that real? Oh my God." She messed up. One of the fake cops started backing away. The other stood frozen, clearly regretting his life choices. Karen, still trying to salvage control, snapped, "This is harassment. I have rights." But her voice was cracking. My husband raised an eyebrow. "You do have rights, and you're about to be read, every single one of them." Before anyone could react, real sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had already called for backup. The entire wedding was now a live crime scene. Guests started moving back as law enforcement arrived, eyes scanning the situation. And let me tell you, when they saw who was standing in uniform and who was in cuffs, they knew exactly how serious this was. Karen tried one last move. She turned to me. "You think you're better than everyone. You don't deserve this wedding." I didn't even flinch. I walked right past her, straight to my husband, and kissed him like the world was watching. Because it was. The kiss should have been our big moment. But instead of applause and music, we heard the clink of handcuffs and Karen screaming bloody murder as two real officers escorted her away from the venue in heels she clearly couldn't walk in. "You'll hear from my lawyer. This is a setup. I know people." She shrieked the whole way to the cruiser like a bad reality TV villain refusing to leave the set. But just as we thought it was over, that we could finally breathe, one of the fake cops turned around, looked my husband in the eye and said, "I didn't do this for her. She said he'd be here." That stopped everything. My husband narrowed his eyes. "Who's he?" The man didn't answer. He just looked past us toward the crowd. My stomach dropped. I turned to see where he was looking, and that's when I saw him. A tall man in a gray suit, standing near the back of the crowd. Clean-shaven, sunglasses on despite the setting sun, and holding a phone to his ear. He wasn't a guest. No one knew him, but he was watching everything. My husband reached for his radio. "We've got another player on site. Unknown male. Possible coordination. Keep eyes on him." The man in gray didn't wait. As if he knew we'd spotted him, he turned and slipped out through the back gate. Fast. Too fast for someone just passing by. Now the wedding wasn't just ruined. It was compromised. The guests were in chaos. Some still filming, others herding their kids away from the scene. The DJ had stopped the music. The caterers stood frozen. And I was still in my wedding dress, heels sinking into the grass, staring at the empty space where the man in gray had vanished. My husband tapped his earpiece. "Unit 4, sweep perimeter. Lock down the venue. No one in or out until we ID that man." The fake cop who was still on the scene, a kid really early 20s at best, was now shaking. "Look, I was paid in cash. She told me it was just to scare some people, make it dramatic, nothing illegal. I swear." But we knew better. My husband turned to me, voice low. "If this guy in gray is who I think he is, this goes way beyond Karen and her HOA vendetta." I blinked. "Wait, what are you saying? You recognize him?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I've seen him once. In a briefing. He's not HOA. He's not local. He's not supposed to exist." My skin went cold. A guest ran up to us, breathless. "He dropped something. That guy in the suit, he dropped this." It was a silver USB drive. No markings. Just clean, cold metal. My husband took it, stared at it like it was a live grenade. "We need to get this to HQ. Now." Suddenly, his phone buzzed. One glance at the screen, and I saw it, the smallest change in his expression. A shadow of something I'd never seen on his face before. Not fear. Not confusion. It was recognition. He looked at me. "The name on this file, it's yours." I froze. "What do you mean, it's my name?" I whispered, the veil on my head suddenly feeling like a noose. My husband didn't look up. He plugged the USB into his encrypted device, opened a single file. And then his face went pale. "You were marked 10 years ago." He turned the screen toward me. There it was. A classified dossier. My high school photo. My full name. A string of numbers. A tag labeled Subject. Level 3 asset dormant. I felt like the ground vanished under my feet. "What the hell is this?" "I don't know," he said, eyes locked on the screen. "But it means someone was watching you, since before we ever met." Suddenly, the man in the gray suit didn't feel like some ominous stranger. He felt familiar. A flash, a memory I hadn't thought about in years. That same face, standing by the school gates when I was 16. I told myself it was just a truant officer, but he never spoke, never approached, just watched. And now he'd returned, on my wedding day. By nightfall, the venue was fully secured. Karen had been arrested and charged with multiple counts, including conspiracy and impersonation. But her involvement, it turned out, had only been a distraction. A loud, chaotic cover for something much quieter, much colder. The file on the USB pointed to a program now defunct called EchoNest. It was a federal sleeper initiative, buried and disavowed after a whistleblower leak. No surviving records, no known agents. Except me. I wasn't just being watched. I had been chosen. 3 days later, we were moved into federal protection. The honeymoon was canceled. The story in the press was a wedding interrupted by HOA drama, but the truth never made the headlines. Late one night, I sat on the porch of our safe house, staring out into the woods. "Why me?" I asked. My husband sat beside me, reached for my hand. "Maybe we'll never know," he said. "But they came back for a reason. And now, you get to choose what happens next." And I realized he was right. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning.